Hey everybody, Mark Edward Lewis here with Cinema Sound. Today we're going to continue with our video series on doing music yourself for your film. And today we're going to be talking about orchestral scores in the box, samples, and how to make them sound great. A little three-part series. Today we're going to be talking about where to put all those samples so that they sound like it's real. Let's roll. All right, we're here in Apple Logic Pro X, where I've got a cue that I've set up here. It's all orchestra with hybrid elements and things like this. And let's see what it sounds like here with the pilot, this action scene from the pilot of my series, Blade of Honor. All right, so there's 8 million things going on there, obviously. And in this video, we're going to be talking about where to put things in the orchestra to make them sound real. Let's listen now to what it sounds like with things not in the right place. It's a pretty serious difference. So where should we put things in the world of orchestra and in the box? Let's see here. I'm going to pull up a picture. So here we have an orchestra with our good friends from the Oregon Symphony. And, pretty good-sized orchestra and a big studio session, which is what we're trying to emulate here. You probably have twice as many of these guys, twice as many woodwinds. And maybe even twice as many brass players up here. But here's what we want to look at first is the string players, and that's everybody here. Over here, you've got the first violins, and you can see they're sort of here in this front row. And then you've got the second violins, which are down here in this row back here. Now, normally in an orchestra, the way they used to set it up, you'd have the violas, which are these folks right here, where the celli are, the celli, and they would be behind them, and the celli would be here. But actually, Oregon's really smart about how the positions of the instruments are, that cellos actually focus this way, so the sound would come out, and having them a little more angled. It doesn't really matter, but the bottom line is you're going to have the violas and the celli on the right, and the first and second violins on the left. And whether you want to put the celli a little farther back or the violas closer, that's kind of up to you to taste. But that's where the strings would go. And you would pan everybody accordingly. Then back here, you can kind of, there's different organizations of woodwinds. That's these folks right here. We would even include the horns, the French horns in there. But the horns are going to be slightly to the left and definitely deep back on the stage. And then the woodwinds would be a nice, happy intermediary in terms of depth between the percussion and the strings. Over here, you've got the hard brass, the trombones and the trumpets. They're usually over to the right side, and tuba way over here. What's interesting to note that most people get wrong is that the bass instruments, pitched-based instruments for strings, which are the double basses, these stand-up guys here, and the tuba are on the right. So it's actually reasonable that your low frequencies are going to be sort of right panned, right hard, because of how the orchestra's set up. Then, of course, over here, you've got all the various kinds of percussion. Sometimes the timpani's in the middle. Sometimes it's over to the left. Harp and piano are almost always hard left. Celeste and other things, tubular bells are over here. Sometimes I like to actually take the celeste and pan it over here just to give the right channel a little more high frequencies, or maybe I'll put the harp over there. These are players that are way, way back in the pan. And we're going to talk about where to put instruments in depth in another video in this series. So let's see how we do this. And this is a really critical thing to understand. If you have, let me just actually pull up one of these French horn samples that I have here. This is from Cinebrass. And you've got various kinds of microphone positions. And although you certainly have the ability to pan things left and right on the channel itself, if you have samples that have kind of like baked in room recordings, you pretty much want to use those because a good sample library like Cinebrass and many others, Vienna, to some extent, have the imagery of where that player would be, to an audience baked into the samples. So this would be a close sound with the microphone right on top of the player with no room involved at all, or very, very little room involved. And you can see it's panned just a little bit. But if we use the room samples that they have baked in, where the microphones are quite a bit farther back and getting the room, it's quite a bit nicer. And then, at least with cinema sound samples, you can actually do a clever mix of all kinds of microphones. Which is pretty cool. But it takes care of where that should be in the room, left or right or front or back, because they've actually recorded the samples with that, all of that baked in. But let's look at a sound that isn't that way. This is Vienna Instruments, their Clarinet. And that's with everything built in, the hall and everything else, and the pan. But let's make it mono. This is just the sample without anything on it. And it's kind of right in the middle. It's a nice stereo sample, of course, and it's also very close. But we don't want anything to do with that. And again, we're going to talk about how to push clarinets and all these instruments back on the stage using reverbs in a different video. But what we would do is a couple of ways we can do it. We can pan, just use this pan knob like this. And I would kind of bake it over here at -9 or so. But when we add a stage reverb, which is the reverb of the stage that they're on, not the hall that the audience is sitting in, but the stage, then that sort of balances out the fact that that hard panning kind of really messes with the sound. Again, if I turn off this reverb, and if I pan it even more, it just kind of feels like one ear is just not working, really. But when we add that reverb back in, it helps blend everything in as though it had been, the sound of the room had been baked into the samples. Again, we'll talk about this more. So that's how we would pan them. And as I said, you can do anything you want. It's just if you want to represent what the orchestra, how it was panned, you definitely want to take note of how they are positioned here and represent them in how you pan and what kind of reverb you use. And we do have another video not only on reverb and how to help blend the sound, which is of an orchestra sample, which is really kind of the most important part, but also how to EQ certain instruments as they go back in a different video. And if this video has been helpful to you, please subscribe to our channel here and view all of the other hundreds of videos we have here on independent media creative sound generation and immersion. We also have our website, cinemasound.com, which we'd love to see you come visit, where again, there's hundreds and hundreds of free articles and an 85-hour education just made for you to take you from, I've never done any sound before in multimedia, all the way to Hollywood-level professional deliveries in surround sound. Until then, we'll see you in post.
Even if it's for yourself.